Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. It started like most disasters do. Slow, then all at once. I was in my apartment in Colorado Springs when the emergency alert came through. At first, it was just a vibration on my phone. I didn't even look at it right away. Just assumed it was another Amber Alert or weather warning. But then, every device lit up at once. The TV switched channels automatically. The smart speaker buzzed and gave that long, droning tone that usually precedes an evacuation order or nuclear drill. But it was the message itself that sent a chill through me. Zombie attack warning. Lock your home now. This is not a test. My name is Adam Carter. I'm 35 years old. Before everything went downhill, I worked as a public safety systems technician, installing and maintaining radio repeaters for emergency services across El Paso County. I've worked with first responders, climbed radio towers at midnight during snowstorms, and even helped set up fail-safe comms for the Air Force Academy. I've seen the chaos that comes with wildfires, downed aircraft, and mountain rescues. But nothing prepared me for this. At 5:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, I was sitting on my couch, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped Stanley thermos. The sunset was just brushing the Rockies in the distance, casting a blood-orange glow over Garden of the Gods. That's when the sirens started. Not the weather sirens, but the short-range tactical ones mounted to city police units. I knew that sound. That was a code black broadcast. Not public-facing, not meant for civilians. That's when I stood up. My hands moved on muscle memory. I grabbed the battery-powered radio I kept by the window, tuned it to the CSFD secondary dispatch, and turned up the volume. The voices were clipped and urgent. Multiple confirmed casualties near North Academy. Responding units report hostile civilians exhibiting extreme aggression. Backup requested. Another voice chimed in. Unit 314, do not engage. Containment order active. If bitten, do not assist. Repeat, do not assist. Bitten? I looked out the window of my third-story unit. My apartment overlooked North Nevada Avenue, near the Colorado Technical University campus. Normally, you'd see cars coming home, joggers with headphones, delivery drivers doing their end-of-shift runs. But now it was gridlocked, people ditching cars, others running on foot. No gunshots yet, just the chaos of a city trying to flee something it didn't understand. I didn't need more proof. I locked the deadbolt, moved my couch in front of the door, and pulled my blackout curtains. I've always been prepared. Some might call it paranoid. But in my line of work, being cautious is the difference between life and death. I'd been stockpiling emergency supplies since the pandemic days. 2 years' worth of MREs, freeze-dried vegetables, and clean water in stackable drums. I had a solar charger kit, a medical-grade trauma kit, and even a Geiger counter for fun. But more importantly, I had a firearm, a Sig Sauer P 320X carry with a custom grip, along with 3 spare mags and about 400 rounds in sealed boxes. Colorado laws were favorable to those who planned ahead. But even with all that, I wasn't ready. At 6:07 p.m., the power went out. That's when the screaming began in earnest. I lit my Coleman lantern and kept it low, just enough to illuminate my hallway. I could hear them now, heavy thudding against metal doors, glass shattering somewhere on the first floor, the sound of skin hitting drywall. Someone below me was begging to be let in. I heard a woman's voice scream, followed by what I can only describe as a choking gurgle, then silence. I picked up the radio again. CPD Unit 221 is down. We're falling back to Memorial Central. They're not, Jesus, they're not human anymore. The feed cut out. Around 8 p.m., I heard movement on my floor. Someone trying each apartment door, methodically. They weren't knocking, just jiggling handles, pausing, then moving to the next. I aimed my cig at the door and waited. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat was a hammer in my ears. Whoever, or whatever it was, stopped at my door. I saw the shadow under the crack. No words, just slow breathing, wet and erratic. It stayed there for at least 2 minutes, then silence, then scratch, scratch. Fingernails dragged across my door, not pounding, not trying to break in, just marking, like it knew I was inside. Then the footsteps moved on. I didn't sleep that night. Morning came with the sound of helicopters. I peeked out the curtain for the first time since I locked myself in. A Black Hawk, Army designation, maybe from Fort Carson, hovered briefly over the intersection, then turned hard west. I saw a formation of 6 armored Humvees speeding north on Nevada, mounted with M2 Browning .50 caliber turrets and National Guard markings. The city was in full mobilization. But even from here, I could see it wasn't working. Fires had started, smoke columns rising from old Colorado City and the edge of downtown. A long line of wrecked cars jammed Fillmore Street, some overturned, some burned out. The infection had moved faster than any evacuation plan. I checked my phone, still no signal. I turned on the emergency radio again. There was only static until 9:13 a.m. when a woman's voice cut through. "This is emergency channel 45. All civilians are instructed to remain indoors. Secure your home. Do not attempt to flee unless instructed by military personnel. We are experiencing a Class 3 biological emergency. Repeat, this is a Class 3 biological emergency. Containment is in progress." By noon, I was down to one critical decision: stay barricaded or move. I needed more information. I needed human contact. And I needed to know if my sister Rachel was still alive. She lived in a duplex near Cheyenne Mountain State Park, about 14 miles away. Too far to walk. Roads were impassable. But there was another way. The tunnels. Most people don't know this, but Colorado Springs has a patchwork of stormwater tunnels running under the city, some large enough to walk through. During my work on the city's emergency repeaters, I'd mapped a few of them. One of them ran from near my neighborhood all the way down to the edge of Broadmoor, within striking distance of her place. It was dangerous. There were known methane pockets, and in the past, even bear sightings, but it was better than walking through the streets. I packed light. My backpack held medical supplies, 3 loaded mags, a headlamp, 2 canteens, and a field radio. I left most of the food behind, but took a few energy bars. I layered up with my work jacket, flame-resistant, and steel-toed boots. On my way out, I left a note on my whiteboard for any survivors who might come through. "I'm heading to 4385 Hallowell. If you're reading this, stay quiet and stay low. Don't let them see you." Getting to the storm entrance was a nightmare. I waited until 3 a.m., just before moonset. I moved slowly, hugging alleyways and avoiding open streets. I saw them up close for the first time near Wasatch Avenue. 3 figures stumbling down the sidewalk. 2 male, 1 female. They were bloodied barefoot, but fast, too fast. I hid behind a trash enclosure until they passed. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, reflective, like an animal's. They weren't dead, at least not in the traditional sense. Something viral, something violent. I reached the drainage channel by 4 a.m., climbed down the concrete slope, and found the entrance hatch rusted but still intact. It took a full minute of prying with my crowbar to open it without noise. The iron groaned quietly as I wedged it open, revealing a steep concrete shaft leading down into the stormwater tunnels. I clicked on my headlamp and took a breath before dropping in, my boots landing with a splash in an inch of stagnant runoff. The tunnel was colder than I expected, maybe 40 degrees down here, and the condensation on the walls made everything slick. The air smelled of mildew, rust, and the sharp tang of something animal. Not rot exactly, but something close. I stepped carefully along the center walkway, a narrow ledge raised above the drainage trough. My flashlight beam illuminated graffiti, old utility markings, and the occasional city maintenance sign, but no footprints. That was good. No one had come this way recently. The storm system beneath Colorado Springs was a maze, built in layers over the decades. Some sections were reinforced with modern concrete segments, complete with sealed access doors and emergency ladders. Others were relics of the 50s, crumbling brickwork, cracked pipes, and ceiling rebar jutting like ribs. I moved through it in sections, checking my digital compass against the map I'd memorized years ago. If I kept heading southwest, I could reach the Broadmoor access junction by dawn. From there, it was a mile-long uphill hike to Rachel's neighborhood, assuming I made it that far. I passed under Cascade Avenue and paused to rest beside a rusted valve panel. My heart was still hammering from the sprint through the alleyways, and I needed to regulate my breathing. I took a sip from my canteen and listened. The tunnels had a rhythm, drips, echoes, the distant sound of water flowing into an open grate. But now I heard something else. Faint, repetitive, a dragging sound, like a boot scuffing concrete. I turned off the headlamp. It was pitch black now, nothing but my ears and my memory. The dragging continued, closer this time, accompanied by wet, irregular breathing. I slid my pistol from the holster and waited, trying not to move. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The sound stopped. I risked switching on the lamp again and pointed it down the tunnel. The beam landed on a maintenance door about 40 feet ahead, partially open. Just past it, a trail of something dark streaked across the concrete, like someone had crawled through oil. I didn't wait to inspect it. I moved, slowly, deliberately. The side tunnel past the hatch was narrower, with a lower ceiling. I ducked as I moved through, trying not to let the flashlight beam linger on anything reflective. I passed another junction and paused again. That's when I found the first body. It was a man, maybe in his late 20s. He was in a city utility uniform, blue coveralls with a name patch that read M. Gordon. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, jaw slack, eyes glassy and unfocused. One of his arms was missing below the elbow, and the stump had been cauterized with what looked like a blowtorch. He hadn't been dead long, maybe an hour or two at most. I crouched beside him and inspected the equipment bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were pliers, a wrench, a handheld gas meter, and a city-issued two-way radio. I took the radio, flicked it on, and heard static followed by a burst of coded beeps. Someone else was still transmitting. I clipped it to my belt and moved on. It wasn't long before the first detour. A cave-in had sealed the western tunnel near Cheyenne Boulevard. The concrete had collapsed inward, and the air smelled thick with concrete dust and something else, like copper and rot. I retraced my steps, took a detour through the utility corridor, and crawled through a narrow ventilation passage that dropped me into an older section of the system. This part wasn't on any official map I'd ever seen. The walls were curved, made of old brick sealed with pitch, and the ground was uneven, sloped toward a black, sluggish stream of runoff. The water was filled with debris, plastic, cloth, even what looked like a child's tricycle wedged between two stones. I pushed forward another half mile, flashlight dimming now. My solar charger wouldn't help underground, and I didn't bring spare batteries. I turned the beam to low to conserve power. That's when I saw the markings. Someone, or something, had scratched symbols into the wall at regular intervals. Circles, intersected lines, patterns almost like runes. Not graffiti, not vandalism, too precise. Each was about eye height, etched into the brick with what looked like metal. I slowed my pace and kept my hand near the trigger. The tunnel air grew heavier with each step, the temperature dropping another few degrees. My breath started to fog, and then, just ahead, I heard voices. Not normal voices, not conversation, chanting. I dropped to one knee and killed the light. The voices echoed from a chamber up ahead, past a large metal grate that had rusted open. I crawled forward, using the faint glow from bioluminescent mold on the wall to orient myself. The chamber beyond was circular, maybe 20 feet across, with a collapsed ceiling section and a makeshift altar of some kind in the center. Around it were 4 people in ragged clothes, chanting, swaying, smeared in something dark. One of them wore a broken firefighter helmet. Another had what looked like a bloodied hospital gown. And at their feet was a body. It was still moving. I don't know what I was witnessing. Some kind of ritual, a response to the outbreak, a cult. The infected person on the ground was convulsing, twitching against restraints of twisted copper wire. One of the figures knelt beside it, whispered something into its ear, then jammed a shard of glass into its neck. The convulsions stopped. That's when my radio cracked to life, loud, a burst of static followed by a voice. To all surviving personnel, do not engage with underground dwellers. They are hostile. They are not salvageable. Repeat. The figures turned at once. I ran. I didn't fire. I didn't look back. I just sprinted into the side corridor, ducked under a crumbling pipe, and navigated blind for the next 100 feet. Behind me, I heard the sound of pursuit, bare feet on stone, something metallic scraping against the walls. I reached a fork, turned hard left, and dove into a culvert barely wide enough for my body. I dragged myself forward until the sounds behind me vanished. I lay in that concrete tube for 15 minutes, barely breathing, heart pounding so hard it made my vision blur. When I finally emerged, I was somewhere near the base of Stratton Forest. I recognized the junction by the old access sign, Unit 12B, and knew I was close to my sister's neighborhood. I followed the last 100 yards of tunnel, climbed a rusted ladder to an overgrown manhole, and lifted the cover just enough to peek through. I emerged onto a residential cul-de-sac that had once been quiet, upscale, and boring. Now it was a war zone. 4 houses were on fire. The 5th had its garage door caved in from the inside. One of the streetlights was lying across the road, snapped at the base. A military Humvee was overturned near the roundabout, the windshield punched out, streaked with blood. I saw the remains of at least 3 bodies nearby. Civilians, maybe responders. No movement, no sound except the fire. Rachel's house was still standing, barely. The front windows were boarded. The side fence had been reinforced with plywood and furniture. I saw a hand-scrawled message on the siding in spray paint. No entry, sick inside. I moved to the back, careful not to make noise, and tapped the butt of my pistol against the window pane in the kitchen. Once, twice, 3 times. Movement inside. A face appeared. Rachel. She was pale, eyes wide with disbelief. She disappeared for a moment, then came back with a crowbar and unlatched the side door. It creaked open just enough for me to slide inside, and she locked it behind me immediately. She didn't speak, just hugged me, fiercely. Then she whispered, "They already got Michael. I don't think I'm clean either." I stood there, stunned. Michael was her husband. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands. The house was stocked. Rachel had clearly prepared, but the air inside was tense and heavy with something more than fear. It was the kind of weight that seeps into your bones, the kind that makes you move slower, speak softer, as if sound alone might cause something to unravel. She hadn't slept, maybe not for days. Her eyes scanned the corners of the room compulsively, like someone who no longer trusted her own home. She said nothing else as she led me down the hallway, her steps measured, quiet. When she stopped at the door to the guest bedroom, she didn't turn the knob right away. Her hand hovered over it, fingers twitching. Then she opened it and stepped aside. I followed her in. Michael was strapped to the mattress with nylon toe straps, 2 across the chest, 1 at the thighs, and another around each ankle. He wasn't thrashing. He wasn't foaming at the mouth. He was just lying there, breathing shallowly, eyes open and fixed on the ceiling. His shirt was soaked with sweat and stuck to his skin. His lips were cracked, but he was smiling. Not in a vacant, infected way. It was something else, composed, intentional. I crouched beside him. "Michael," I said, keeping my voice level, "do you know who I am?" His eyes flicked toward me. "Adam Carter," he whispered hoarsely. "Rachel's brother, systems tech, worked out of the West Repeater Hub." My skin prickled. That wasn't small talk. That was clinical, like he was logging information for reference. I turned to Rachel. How long has he been like this? She pulled her hoodie sleeves down over her hands and crossed her arms, hugging herself. He was bitten 4 days ago, in the hospital. One of the early patients. They hadn't locked the ward down yet. He was doing intake reports. He was helping. Her voice cracked. I thought it was a scratch. He said it barely broke skin. That was Thursday. I looked back at Michael. 4 days. The military said people turned within hours, some as fast as 30 minutes. But here he was, awake, cognizant, not violent, yet clearly not fully himself. He smiled again, the corners of his mouth twitching. They were wrong, you know, he said softly, about the timeline. It doesn't always happen fast. It depends on variables, metabolism, neurological thresholds, immune markers. Rachel sat on the floor, her back against the dresser. He was working with a civilian contractor before this started, she said. Biologic Group, a private diagnostics firm out of Denver. They had a sub-department here, on Fort Carson grounds. Medical research, unofficial. Michael's breathing hitched, and he let out a dry cough. They were developing a synthetic viral modulator, military application, rapid wound regeneration in battlefield conditions, accelerated cell replication. Didn't go through proper review. Funding came through black channels. I was just on the data side. Then people started getting sick. His hands flexed against the straps, but not aggressively, more like a tic, a compulsive twitch. The first signs weren't obvious. Headaches, changes in sleep cycles, heat intolerance. Then came the aggression, short-term memory collapse, photophobia, and then the hunger. My stomach turned. Hunger for what? Michael's smile faded. Not food, not water, not even pain. It's like the body knows it's dying, and the brain refuses to accept it. It panics, it fights, it rewrites. Rachel looked at me. I was going to put him down on the second night. I had the pistol. I even loaded it. But then he started talking again, calm, focused. He told me not to, said he had notes, data, that if I helped him, we might find out what this actually is. I stood slowly, the back of my neck damp with sweat. You kept him alive to run an experiment? She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. That night, I read through everything Michael had compiled. His laptop was duct-taped shut and sealed in a Faraday sleeve. Rachel powered it through a converted generator in the garage, jury-rigged from a Honda EU 2200 Pi and a pair of deep-cycle marine batteries. The data inside was heavily encrypted. Michael had built the protection himself, but he walked me through the access layers in a quiet monotone. Nothing on the drive referenced the infection as a virus in the traditional sense. It was labeled HMRS-17, Host-Mediated Regenerative Syndrome, Iteration 17. It wasn't airborne. It was transmitted via blood-to-blood contact, and its replication was driven by mitochondrial hijacking. That's why it spread so fast. Because it used your own body's energy centers against you. And worse, it wasn't a true pathogen. It was designed. The earliest documents dated back 18 months. Initial tests were conducted on pigs and lab primates under controlled conditions. All test subjects showed massive cellular regeneration, even after traumatic injury. But over time, cognitive decay set in. Then cannibalistic behavior. Then breakdown of organ systems. The compound, referred to in internal memos as R-complex inducer, was shut down and moved to deep storage, until someone pulled it back out. Why bring it back? I asked. Michael turned his head on the pillow. Because someone needed results. Fast. Biotech investment is ruthless. If you can't show breakthroughs, you get buried. And DARPA, they were watching. The infection wasn't an accident. It was a weapon. At 4 a.m., we heard the sirens again. But these weren't warning tones. They were distant and constant, coming from the direction of Broadmoor. We went upstairs and looked out the front window. Through a gap in the boarded paneling, I saw a glow on the horizon. Fires. 2 of them, maybe more. somewhere near Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. Then I spotted movement. Figures moving down the main road, not shambling like the infected, but patrolling. I recognized the gear. They were wearing dark grey uniforms with no insignia, tactical armor, suppressed rifles, night vision gear, not National Guard, not regular army either. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Those aren't friendly. We killed the lights and went completely silent. Over the next hour, they moved house to house, checking doors. I saw them drag a family out of the townhouse across the street, a man, woman, and 2 kids. They were marched toward a blacked-out van with no plates, no shouting, no resistance, just surgical precision. I turned to Michael. Who are they? He closed his eyes. Contracted cleanup. I heard rumors. Alpha 1 task units, used in previous outbreaks that never made the news. Their job isn't rescue, it's containment. We kept the house silent for the rest of the morning. No movement, no radio, no lights. Just listening. I kept my weapon loaded and stayed by the staircase in case they came back. They didn't. By the time the sun rose, the van and the team were gone. So were our neighbours. By noon, Michael's condition had worsened. His temperature dropped to 92.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and his fingertips began to discolour. He was still lucid, his mind present, but his body was failing. He told us where to find the backup server drives he had hidden, sealed in Mylar bags in a storm drain across the street. He wanted us to take them to someone named Dr. Adrian Keller, a former DARPA liaison, who'd broken ranks after the program was greenlit. He's in Boulder, Michael whispered, breath rattling. Or he was. University campus lab. He's off-grid now, but he knew what they were doing. He helped me leak parts of the protocol months ago. If he's alive, he'll know what to do with the rest. Rachel knelt beside him, squeezing his hand. Her eyes were red, her face set with quiet defiance. And what about you? Michael shook his head. I'm a bridge between what we were and what this thing is turning us into. I can feel it rewriting me, slower than most, but it's happening. That night, he asked us to record him, not just for research, but as a warning. I set up my old DSLR with a battery extender and let it roll. He spoke for nearly 30 minutes, cataloguing symptoms, observations, and confessions. At the end, he looked directly into the lens and said, "If you're watching this, and I'm gone, it's not about survival, not anymore. It's about making sure this never happens again." We buried him in the backyard just before dawn. He passed some time in the night, quietly. No screaming, no transformation. Just stopped. Rachel didn't cry. She dug the grave herself. I stood watch with the rifle. We didn't mark the spot, just covered it with stone. After we sealed the back gate and swept the kitchen for supplies one last time, we loaded the packs, 2 bags, mine and Rachel's, each no more than 30 pounds. Water, the encrypted drives, a small folding solar panel, ammunition, compact medical kit, and dry food enough for 5 days. Rachel wore Michael's chest rig, the radio clipped on the shoulder strap. She didn't speak much. I didn't press her. The plan was bolder. It was a 2-day hike minimum, through territory we hadn't scouted, along highways we knew were either abandoned or barricaded. We didn't know what sections were under military lockdown, or if the infection had already moved into the mountain communities. But we had no choice. If Keller was still alive, and if he was who Michael said he was the last link in the chain before the whole truth disappeared behind a containment wall and a press release. We left just before 9 a.m., cutting northeast through Stratton Preserve and sticking to overgrown service trails. I knew the geography well enough to navigate without drawing attention. Colorado Springs was a crater of silence now. No sirens, no patrols, no movement. Just the occasional echo of something metallic clanging against concrete in the distance, or the cry of a bird that hadn't yet fled. Most of the neighborhoods we passed were burned out or barricaded, their driveways littered with vehicles, many of them abandoned mid-escape. We didn't approach any of them. By midday, we crossed into the forested slope that skirted Highway 24. The sun was hot overhead, but the air smelled clean for the first time in days. Pine, dust, distant fire. A long plume of smoke rose on the western horizon, beyond Manitou Springs, possibly Woodland Park. Another hot zone. Rachel finally spoke after we passed a mile marker stripped bare by wind and time. If Keller's gone, we'll need to find another way to release the data. I nodded. If he's gone, I'll upload it myself. I've got the sat phone Michael embedded into the drives. There's a failsafe function if the main recipient node fails. Broadcast protocol over open amateur bands, high frequency, rotated hash encryption. It'll get out if someone's listening. She glanced at me. And if they're not, then we keep walking until we find someone who is. By the time we reached Woodland Hills campground, the sun was beginning to dip behind the ridgeline. We found shelter in one of the concrete ranger huts, barricaded the door with a broken picnic table, and hung emergency blankets over the window gaps to suppress any light. Rachel tended to a blister forming under her bootlaces. I ate half a protein bar, dry and tasteless. That night, I dreamt about Michael, not as he died, but as he was before, sitting at my table on the 4th of July last year, his laugh echoing in the yard as we drank cheap beer and grilled burgers that now felt like a memory from someone else's life. When I woke at 3 a.m., I could still hear his voice, faint and distant, as if carried on static. We broke camp before sunrise. I left a message inside the ranger hut, written in grease pencil on the wall. Data safe, heading north to Boulder. Do not trust the uniforms without insignia. Avoid cities. Day 2 on foot was worse. The terrain grew steep and uneven as we cut across old ATV trails northwest of Divide. Pockets of blackened forest surrounded us, remnants of a fire that had rolled through weeks before, likely part of the early containment effort. Satellite burns, intentionally set. I'd seen the planning documents in the emergency planning circles before. If they can't isolate a hot zone, they incinerate it and blame climate. Around midday, we found the remains of a Colorado State Patrol checkpoint along Route 67. 2 burned out cruisers, their light bars warped from heat. The bodies were still there, skeletal in some cases, others mummified by the arid air. One of them had a laminated map melted to the dashboard. I scraped it free with a utility knife and found it marked with red X's, evacuation corridors and military buffer zones. One of them ran straight through Deckers and north toward Pine Junction. That route had been crossed out with permanent marker. The note beside it read, "Unsustainable withdrawn perimeter breached." We diverted east, bypassing the marked route, and took shelter that night near Cheeseman Reservoir in an abandoned firewatch station. The air was thinner, colder. I found an old portable generator in the basement, emptied of fuel. Rachel managed to charge the sat phone just enough to bring up the connection interface, but we didn't risk transmitting yet. Keller would only respond to the pre-coded handshake signal embedded in the drive. Anything else could be intercepted. It was that night, on the second floor of that dark tower, under a ceiling of stars, that Rachel finally broke. She didn't sob or cry. She just stared out the broken window and said, "I think he knew it was going to happen. Before the news, before the infection. He used to sit up late reading reports from his old projects, emails. He'd lock himself in the office and only come out after midnight. Sometimes I'd find him in the garage just staring at his own hands, like he didn't recognize them." I listened without interrupting. He told me once that the hardest part of working in research wasn't the data, it was watching people lie about it, watching them bury what they didn't like, the parts that didn't fit the result they were paid to find. I didn't understand it then. I do now. She turned towards me. "They're going to erase all of it, Adam. Every document, every whistleblower, every contaminated city. If we don't get this drive to someone who can blow it wide open, it'll be like none of it ever happened." I nodded. "Then we don't stop moving." We reached the outskirts of Boulder late on the 3rd day. We bypassed major roads and filtered through the southern canyons, avoiding what few drone patrols still circled overhead. As we descended into the valley basin, we could see the city spread below us, a patchwork of intact structures, smoking ruins, and military staging areas. Unlike Springs, Boulder hadn't been firebombed. Not completely. That meant something. Either they were still trying to protect it, or they needed something from it. I suspected the latter. According to Michael's notes, Keller had maintained a lab inside the basement of the university's integrated physiology building on the East Campus. We approached just after dusk, following the back trail past East Aurora and onto a bike path lined with abandoned tents and scattered debris. The area had once been a shelter encampment. Now it was a ghost town. We moved in silence, flashlights off, until we reached the glass facade of the building. It had been boarded up, tagged with a red CDC quarantine symbol. The lock was magnetic, but the power had long since failed. I pried it open with a wedge bar and we slipped inside. The interior was dark, but not silent. There was a low humming sound coming from below. I found the elevator panel, dead, and we located the stairwell to the basement. As we descended, the temperature dropped. The humming grew louder, not mechanical, organic. When we opened the lab door, the smell hit us first. Antiseptic, copper, and something fungal. Keller was there, or what was left of him. He was in a chair, surrounded by servers, cables, blood-stained notebooks, and IV bags, long emptied. His eyes were open, staring at the far wall. His chest wasn't moving. A small black box sat on the desk beside him, hooked into a hardwired transmitter. Rachel checked his pulse anyway. Nothing. But on the monitor behind him, a blinking prompt was still active. Receiving signal lost sync 36 minutes ago. He transmitted something before he died. The drive perhaps, or a data dump. Either way, he had done his part. Now it was our turn. I plugged Michael's drive into the terminal. The interface lit up, slow but functional. A password prompt appeared, just as Michael had described. I entered the phrase. The dead remember what we forgot. The data began decrypting, line by line, folder by folder, protocols, emails, memos, field notes, video files, clinical footage. Rachel stepped back, hand over her mouth. It's all here, she whispered. Everything. I pulled the satellite interface onto the second screen. The transmission network was limited. Only 3 nodes still active. One was in Alaska, another in Eastern Europe, the last in Virginia, Langley. We had a choice. Where do we send it? I asked. Rachel stared at the screen for a long time. Everywhere. I selected all nodes, hit execute. The file buffer loaded. Transmission started. And in that moment, everything we had risked, everything we had lost, became more than just survival. It became a record. Somewhere behind us, we heard a door creak. A voice called out, faint, hoarse. Who's there? We turned, weapons drawn. From the shadows emerged a woman, early 30s, gaunt, wearing a medical badge still clipped to her collar. She looked at us, then at the screen behind me. You're not with them, are you? No, I said, we're not. She looked at the transmitter. Then it's done. And in her eyes, for the first time in days, I saw something other than fear. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.